and welcome to a special free agency or pre-free agency episode of Bruins Tape to Tape. I'm Caroline, and you may notice if you're watching on YouTube, you can already tell, but I am joined today not by my usual fabulous co-host Maria, but by one of our favorite friends of the pod, Mo. So welcome in, Mo. And
Hello.
we are so glad, Maria and I are so glad that you can come in and step in, because Maria is very excitedly awaiting the arrival of her grandchild, hopefully this evening. So that's why she's not with us tonight. So
Thank you
we
for
get to
having
talk-
me. It's always a
Yeah,
pleasure.
we get to talk free agency and kind of do some speculating. Had this whole wonderful little plan. We were going to play a fun game. We were going to have a whole bunch of us on, and then it's just you and me, Mo. So that's okay.
Yep. Plans got fucked. That's all right.
It's a good
We'll have
time.
fun. We got alcohol. We'll be fine.
So today is June 18th. Also just happens to be a playoff game night, and we're doing this instead because we hate the Panthers. So,
And not gonna lie, I did kind of forget the game was on. So whoops.
understandable. Who even wants to watch that game? I don't care. I'm very disappointed that this is the first year. I'm probably not going to watch the presentation of the cup. As you've heard, it's one of my favorite traditions, even if the Bruins aren't there, because I think it's a wonderful tradition. I don't want to watch it. I've never felt this way about watching a team win the cup. So
no. And I think Florida does win. There's just Edmonton is good, but their goalie is just I don't think their goalie is as good as the Panthers offense or their relentless attack, their forecheck. I think it's over tonight. And
what do I always say?
Talking about it.
What do I always say? What wins cups?
Goaltending?
Goalies. Thank
Yep.
you. Defense and goalies. And as beatable as we all thought that Bob looked, apparently that didn't actually translate onto the ice for some strange reason. So anyways, we're not here to talk about the Panthers.
Nope.
We don't want to talk about it. So what we are going to do this evening is do some speculating, play a little armchair GM. Now, I was personally hoping to just be a host because I am no capologist. I am not creative when it comes to putting teams together. I just pay enough attention by listening to a couple of league-wide podcasts to hear about who's available and who's, being talked about. Like, that's the extent of my knowledge. So I'm very excited to have you here, Mo, because I feel like you at least kind of sound like you know what you're talking about when it comes to the cap and building teams.
We'll see.
So it's gonna be fun. So I did some last minute homework myself because I did not expect to have to put together a team this evening, but it's okay.
It's fun. It's all make believe anyways.
It is. So the first piece of news, because there actually hasn't really been any Bruins news yet because it's still playoffs and not much really happens during that time. But we've gotten news from, I believe, was it Ty Anderson sharing the news that Oscar Steen is heading out to test the market. Thoughts on that departure?
I'm really sad. You know me. I mean, I'm sad, but I'm not. And I'm not surprised at all. I mean, Oscar Steen, since probably a couple years ago, has been one of my favorite Bruins prospects. I don't think, as you've seen him play in the NHL, that he really has that ability to be anything more than just a fourth line grinder. Someone that can just really be effective on the forecheck, maybe put the odd goal in here and there, but that's probably about it. I always kind of thought he could be like a poor man's Marchand if he had that ability to actually play with someone. He's got, but he's 26. he doesn't really have a shot. He's just one of those guys that doesn't fit anymore. So I
Yeah.
hope he sticks. I'm sure some team will sign him, probably like
Yeah.
Utah or Seattle, or I hate to say it, but he would fit well on Florida and their forecheck and be a pretty decent
Yeah.
like fourth line guy. But
Yeah.
it sucks. But it's not. He doesn't have a spot on this team for the Bruins, and he doesn't make sense to be in Providence, being
Yeah.
26, 27. So it sucks. So
Yeah. From what I remember, the few times him coming up, he had some good speed, which I think was in his favor. It's
yep.
certainly something that the Bruins have been lacking for a number of years, although last season they started to really add and build on bringing in guys with some speed. But I think you're right. I think it's not that he did anything wrong or that he explicitly underperformed. I think this is one of those situations where Boston is doing him a favor by letting him go, because he, I think, could certainly find himself on a team where he'll get those minutes and he'll be at that level. Like you said, he's too good to spend all of his time down in Providence.
Right.
So, maybe like you said, out in Utah or Detroit or Columbus or
Yep.
someplace like that, that's kind of like not totally in the complete rebuild phase, although kind of, I guess Utah is, but they are ready to spend money. So I don't know what that
Yeah,
means.
who knows?
That's a wild card. So it's too bad. I
Maybe
agree with you, but
yeah.
it was the
Maybe a
right
team like
thing.
Philly, just someone that's more like a grinder type
Mm-hmm.
mentality team that could use a guy that's just like fourth line, kill the odd penalty here and there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
so we'll see. I wish him all the best. He's at least a good player that whoever signs them, if someone does sign him,
Yeah.
they'll be happy with what they get as long as they don't expect, more than 10 points probably.
Right.
So
Exactly. So besides that, there's obviously not been any other news coming out of Boston or really any other team. We've seen a little bit league wide, a couple of extensions, some interesting points that have been made. One that I want to throw out there because I find it very fascinating. I believe it was from an episode of 32 Thoughts where they've re-signed the Rangers have re-signed Capo Caco for an interesting deal. I don't know the details right off the top of my head, but one that is potentially primed to be a trade
hmm.
uh, enhancement further down the line. What's your kind of take on those sorts of deals where it's almost like a not in good faith deal because they've signed this contract with him and those terms make it really attractive for basically using him as a trade piece later on down the
Yeah.
line.
That's kind of interesting. I never really thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be his third contract. So
Mm-hmm.
they signed him to a 1 year, 2.4 mil deal.
Mm-hmm.
He is what, like 23, 24, something like that.
He
And
was
I
a
think this kind of buys out one of his art.
number
He's
one pick,
23. He was top
one
five.
or
I forget
two.
where he is. Yeah.
It was when the Rangers
Okay.
were back-to-back years, like
Yep.
top picks.
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
he came first and Lafreniere came next, or it was vice versa.
It was, yeah, I don't remember, but yeah, he was second overall.
There we go. Mhm.
Yeah, and I guess I hadn't heard that he might be trade bait, but that would be interesting.
The terms of the deal that they signed, well, I mean, he's an RFA, so qualified. The offer that
Right,
they gave him, whatever implied. This is again what I've heard, but
right,
I think
right,
that's always kind of interesting because not only if that's true, it's kind of one of those not in good faith, but also he doesn't really have a choice because he's an
right.
RFA.
Because it's one of those things where isn't this about the time where most teams that actually want to sign their young studs actually sign them to like an 8 year deal or something? They're trying to lock them up sooner.
Right.
So only signing him to that 1 year deal makes it kind of suspect where they don't really quite trust him yet.
Right.
And they've got quite a bit of cap space. I mean, they've got about 9 million in cap space this year, and they've got a
Mm-hmm.
whole bunch of free space next year. So this just seems like one of those kind of weird deals where they might not really trust him. Wasn't that
Right.
kind of the conversation? I don't really follow the Rangers all that close. I don't really follow anybody outside of Boston, but I
Yeah.
thought there was kind of some questions to his game. I mean, 19 points in 61 games is not very
Mm-hmm.
good, and 2 points in 15 playoff games also not very good for a
Mm,
second overall pick. So
no.
I can see what the Rangers are doing. Um, and maybe a team like Seattle, Utah, those guys that are Blackhawks that are trying to rebuild might, try to go after him. But yeah, it seems
Yeah.
weird. I don't know what they're doing. I mean, he's not a
Yeah.
horrible player, but he seems feasible. Someone that
Yeah.
you can kind of put in there as depth, second, third line.
Yeah. So I think everybody pin his name to the back of your brain come February 2025. We might be hearing his name again. I don't know. We'll see. Unless he has
Yeah.
all of a sudden some kind of insane season. But
Right. Yeah,
again,
but it was weird. I remember, like, wasn't there something weird that this is a weird deal for someone in this kind of range for an RFA and like qualifying
mhm,
offers or something?
yeah. So we've
Yeah.
been talking about, again, RFA, UFA. For our listeners who are maybe newer to hockey, again, in the NHL, you have your restricted free agents and you have your unrestricted free agents. Um, your restricted free agents are the younger players, either they've not met a particular threshold in terms of number of years in the league. So if, they came in at 18, 19 years of age, they have to have played a number of seasons. And or if they are under, I believe it's 25 or 26.
Yeah. It's
And
it's one of those.
so
It
it's
depends on a couple of
25.
different, yeah. It
Yep. So
depends
it's,
on a few different kind of factors.
yeah, a couple of combinations. So typically you might see a player who comes into the league at age 18. They might hit the restricted free agency once or twice in their time. And then typically again, once they hit about 26 or what have you, they get to enter free agency, and then it's kind of a free for all, and they get to drive the ship in terms of the direction that their career gets to go into. So the Boston Bruins are looking at a number of free agents this offseason, as well as a couple of restricted free agents, including a pretty significant one that I think now I feel like we all feel like we would have heard news and an offer and a deal signed with Jeremy Swayman. But can
Oh, I
you
thought you were
real
talking about
quickly
Boquist.
no. Can you really quickly give us the timeline of when, so again, as a little refresher or primer, when it comes to
Yep.
restricted free agents, they're not really signing a deal per se, like a contract deal signing you might see like what Pasta signed or some of these other older players have signed. They have to receive a qualifying offer from the team that essentially owns their rights, and it's basically we're going to keep you around, this is what we're going to pay you. They can challenge it and go to arbitration, because that is what Jeremy Swayman did last year with his qualifying offer, but for the most part it's we're going to keep you around, kid, and here's a couple extra more bucks to stick around,
Yep.
and we'll chat again in a couple years when you're a UFA, and that's when you can really ask for the big bucks. So
Yes,
there's a
there's
timing thing too, because free agency, the unrestricted free agency, begins July 1. A restricted free agent can become an unrestricted free agent if they do not receive a qualifying offer, which is how we got Morgan Geekie last year, because he was an RFA in Seattle, and Seattle said thanks but no thanks, and so that allowed him to then essentially go to market. We've got Jeremy Swayman, which I think is probably the biggest, I would have to argue, league-wide, the biggest RFA hanging out there right now. So what is the timing in terms of when those qualifying offers have to be in and, when someone can then go to market? Because this year, I think it's a little bit weird, right? With the timing and the
Yeah, it's a
calendar.
little weird. So I was looking at Puckpedia, and I'm assuming that this is going to be updated information as of this year. So basically, what they're saying is the qualifying offer must be provided to that player either the Monday after the entry draft or June 25th. So it's whatever happens later.
Mm-hmm.
So the draft, I do believe, is June 28th, 29th. So it just so happens that the Monday after the draft is July 1st. So Merry Christmas. Everything will happen July 1st. Yeah,
That's
and
not
and the
stressful at all.
and what I'm reading, so basically a little bit more is the qualifying offer cannot actually be accepted before July 1st. If a qualifying offer is not accepted, it expires by July 15th unless extended in writing by the team. So we might not even find out if Swayman is signed or what's they could
Yeah.
probably, I think, sign him to a deal. There's like a whole bunch of weird stuff that happens all around.
Yeah.
I obviously I don't think Swayman's going to sign a qualifying offer, but
You
in
think he
order
won't?
to, well, I think he'll sign to a big, nice, fat contract and not
Right.
a qualifying offer.
Well, yeah. Because
So, but
that's the other thing, right? Even if you're an RFA, they could go to him and say, we're offering you terms, we're offering
yeah,
you basically what would be a UFA contract out in the wild. We can offer you that.
yeah, I think probably what they'll do is they'll give him a qualifying offer, and then they've got 2 weeks to basically then negotiate that contract. So
Right.
that's kind of what they did with Steen in saying, we're not going to extend that qualifying offer to you. Effective July 1st, you are now an unrestricted free agent. Good luck. Go have fun.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, he was going to be an unrestricted free agent regardless because of his age.
True. He was that group sick. I think it was a group
Yeah,
sick
he was in that weird
RFA
group.
or
He aged
something.
out.
Yeah, he's got that weird shit.
Yeah.
But I think it was effectively that type of aspect where it was known that the Bruins were not going to sign him. Like you said with
Yep.
Geeky, is Seattle did not offer that, so he went to the free agency.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see where now everything kind of happens on that same day.
Yeah.
Which actually is a Monday, so that work day is going to be awesome.
I know. Well, and I would hope,
Excited.
although you can't ever necessarily rely on an employer to be a decent person, but I would
Work
hope
from
that
home.
I know, right? But I would hope that any of those RFAs who, and like we all know,
Oh yeah.
agents are doing work and they're doing all that stuff. Like nobody starts working on this on July 1st, right?
No.
So I would hope that the majority of players who are currently RFAs who will not be receiving qualifying offer would know before Monday,
Oh yeah.
because it just then so happens. Like it doesn't always line up this way. It's actually kind of crappy for any RFAs who don't get a qualifying offer because their agent and they have to work like overtime to
Right.
get a deal and make sure they still are employed,
Right.
so
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see.
We know the Bruins will do right by everybody. I mean,
And they have
Don
already
and
shown
Cam,
they've
and
started to do that with
yeah,
Steen, so
it's just none of this stuff will go public.
right.
I'm sure this stuff going public with Steen and whatnot is still with the blessing of the Bruins and management
100%.
and whatnot. And wasn't it during the end of the year press conference they even said they were open and honest and going to
Yeah.
communicate with everybody. They already had like that first kind of conversation where they were leaning and what they wanted to
Yeah.
do with everybody. So
Yeah.
if the Bruins appear from the outside to be a well-run, well-structured organization where they actually have a strategy. And so I'm confident that at least internally everyone knows what they're doing. And I think
Yeah.
just because we don't know about it doesn't mean the people that matter don't know about it.
And
So
I think
we
it's,
probably shouldn't know about it.
yeah, it's definitely a PR thing that I think
Yep.
is good for everybody. Everybody benefits from that announcement, that,
Yep.
breaking news from Ty Anderson, because
And that's
Boston's rapport amongst the fans, amongst other players, grows because
right.
they are being seen as, look, we're an honest employer. We're going to be upfront and we're going to be honest and we're going to give you time. And that, benefits Steen because it gives him and his agent time to start talking
Yep.
to other
Yep.
teams. So that way
I
he's
mean,
not left out in the cold, come July
yep.
2nd and there's no room for him, a la Bert last season.
Yep. Now, the Bruins drafted Oscar in 2016.
A lifetime
So
ago.
he's been a Bruin for 8 years?
Yeah, that's a
Damn.
good amount of time.
Damn.
That's a good
So,
amount of time.
yeah. So they,
So,
what? They drafted him 18? Wow. So they're doing right by their
yes,
players. So you got to give them
that's the
kudos for that.
best. The
Yep.
best of the outcome that you probably don't want, which is you want to stay a Bruin, but it's the best way. It's the best way to go out, right? So you can't complain.
Yep.
So
No,
I
definitely.
think we're everybody who listens, I think we're all on the same page that it would be the most insane outcome to wake up on July 1st and not see Jeremy Swayman signed. I think, we're going to talk about what potentially the future makeup of this team is going to look like. And there are a couple of things that I think we can all make, the understanding. Jeremy Swayman will be a Boston Bruin. I mean, if he's not, holy cow. But let's just make that assumption for this evening.
Otherwise, someone signed him to a huge offer sheet at like 12 million or
Geez,
something.
Louise. Well, I'll be curious to see what
So,
what kind of offer you made for him. Because I was going crazy. I'm like, sure, here, $88 million. Who wants it? But the other
I do.
RFAs, yeah, right. Please. The other RFAs, we've got Brandon Bussey, and we've got Jesper Boqvist. So those are the two who kind of have the least amount of wiggle room and options, but there are quite a few UFAs. We've got, of course, the big one that we've all talked about, Jake DeBrusk, Danton Heinen. We've got Pat Maroon. I don't know why Jason Megna. I'm like, he's on the list, but did he even play? I don't know. We won't talk about him.
The last game of the year, right?
All right, we won't talk
Or
about
no,
him. That doesn't count.
I forget.
I don't know. See, that's my point. We'll just
Doesn't
pretend
matter.
that he's not there. JVR, Derek Forbert, Matt Grzelcyk, Kevin Shattenkirk. So this is what we're gonna do, okay? Because I think again we're on the same page. I think we're gonna make the assumption that JVR, he's either gonna retire or he's gonna do one more year someplace else. He's 35. He's hit that 1,000 game mark. Quite frankly, I think he should retire because he's had a good career. Kevin Shattenkirk, I think he might have another year in him, but it's not going to be with the Boston Bruins. He's about I forget the number, 40 or 60 some odd games. It's less than a season's worth of games for him to get to 1,000. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's like, let me sign a year somewhere. He's 35, but I don't think he's going to be a Bruin next year. Derek Forbert, what's that? He's super young.
Shattenkirk is still young. Come on. No.
Look,
Forbert's
everybody on this team is officially younger than me. So, that only happened last year. Derek Forbert.
Younger than me too.
Yeah. Well, we're the same age. Derek Forbert, he's an interesting one. I think I think we're both on the same page. The assumption is he's going to market. He's 32 years old. Yes, he's a phenomenal penalty killer, but he has been plagued with injury almost his entire time. Yeah, he makes a lot of money, but he's been injury plagued. I mean, look, I'll be clear. Any guy who wants to throw himself in front of those pucks for the Boston Bruins has my full respect. But I can't have you break both legs, both hands, and God knows what else every season. So sorry, I think we're both on the same page. He's
And getting
not
Peak
coming back.
kind of rendered him useless.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
I view Peak, Forsberg, same guy, same style, same
Yeah.
ability on defense. Yeah, so yeah, I think Forbert will go somewhere and he'll do fine. He'll do great.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's not a Bruin anymore,
No.
which is okay.
Yeah, that's okay. So
Yep.
the question marks we have are, again, Boakfist. What are they going to do with him?
Mhm.
Does Jake go to market? Does Danton go to market? Is there room or a job available for Pat Maroon? Because one of the things I know you've heard us talk about, and our listeners have heard me talk a lot about, when you look at the Boston Bruins and you look at it as an office space, everybody has a role, everybody has a specific job, right? Like just like what we talked about with Oscar Steen, there were
Yep.
no vacancies for his particular line of work on the
Yep.
team. Is there work available for Pat Maroon?
We'll see.
And our other one is, of course, Matt Grzelcyk, which almost feels like a hot take still, but I think everybody is on the same page that I think for the first time in his career, he's going to be leaving New England. So we got a couple of people to talk about who stays, who goes. So super quick, I want to hear your hot take. Boquist, stays or goes?
I think he stays. We'll go
Okay.
through our lineups. I did kind of forget about him. Realistically, I think he resigns.
Yeah.
I thought Boquist was very good the
Mhm.
latter half of last year and the playoffs. I'm trying to remember. I don't think he was very good on faceoffs, which is fine, but
I
he
said
was
quick, Mo.
okay. Sorry, he'll come back.
We'll come back to him.
Yeah, he resigns.
JD, stays or goes?
Oh
And I got some interesting things, some sidebar things to share. We can talk about JD,
man,
but JD, stays or goes?
I think.
It's
All
hard
right,
to answer.
I
He's
think he goes.
27.
I think he goes.
Danton Heinen,
He'll come
stays or
back.
goes? He'll
Oh,
come
he's
back.
back. Yeah.
Pat Maroon.
Back.
Who was the last one? That was it, right?
Rig. Maroon's back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Lucic gone.
well, yeah, we don't speak his name. So
Well, what do you think? Boquist back or
I
gone?
say yes. I see a
Okay.
really good future with him. I love what I saw. Fast. Again, remember, I've been saying this for a long time. We need speed.
Right.
JD. Okay, so I've struggled with him. I've struggled with him.
I know.
I'll tell you this. And this, I'm going to put this out there because then it's going to hold me to making sure that I actually finish this. So last season, I started to develop a model, a rubric for assigning grades to our various free agents. And one of the more interesting statistics that I started to kind of recreate, it's player usage. It's something that's been out there for quite a long time. And it's looking at players and how much they're being used compared to players on their team and the players out in the wild, so to speak. And I made an interesting discovery this evening as I was running this year's stats through the model that JD got a big bump in terms of his usage, not just compared to other forwards on the Boston Bruins, but also compared to forwards across the league. And that gave me pause because I thought, well, man, he wasn't doing anything, but actually maybe, and you kind of pointed this out, maybe it wasn't that he was doing less or not accomplishing as much, but his exposure to, with more minutes, being more heavily used, maybe it just kind of got washed out. That, I don't know.
Yep. He's a tough case, right?
I don't know.
His eye test is he does so many good things away from the puck, away from the
Yes.
spreadsheet, where you expect him to be a solid player. He's not a first line. He's not a top line guy.
Yep.
But is he a second line guy? Maybe. But he'd be a really good third line winger.
Yeah.
And the
And I
problem
think,
is making 5.5 mil what you want. And then if you add guys as him and Coyle, the appropriate dynamic, where I don't really think it is.
yeah.
So it's tough where I don't want him as my second line winger to
Yeah.
be that scoring threat, because he's not a scoring threat. But he does so many things outside of that, where if he was going to make 4.5, maybe on a team on a third line, I would be okay with that. So it's all that kind of thing as to like who's out there, who's he playing with, and that whole
Yeah.
kind of team dynamic, where unfortunately I just don't know where he fits long term. It's a tough one.
And I think it doesn't help his past reputation in Boston. Doesn't help him in this situation, because I think it makes it a lot harder to give him the benefit of the doubt. So
where he
I don't
wanted
know.
to trade and then rescinded it, and now he's happy, and he's a tough guy.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. Like, I think at the end of the day, and if Maria were here, she'd be yelling at me for saying this. I think at the end of the day, I don't want him to go somewhere else. I think I am actually afraid of him going somewhere else
and becoming what we expected him to be in Boston. Right, it's tough.
Yeah.
But the way I've always framed it is he a guy that you win a Stanley Cup because? And I don't know if he's that guy that you win that Stanley Cup because.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then you have to learn when to walk away.
And I think the fact that there was no deal made before the end of the season tells me at this point, it's June 18th.
Right.
I don't know. It makes me think that he's going to market.
Wasn't it? I forget. Didn't Don say there was an offer out to him from Boston that he didn't agree to, or something, right?
Yeah.
So
it was implied that they'd been communicating, offers were made, but there was still a distance. And who knows what that was? Was it term in terms of like how long his contract was going to be for, or the dollar amount?
Right. And the crazy thing,
his problem is, again, he didn't make like a crazy good case for big bucks last season. But you're also right. Like he still fills a role,
right,
as the playmaker and what have you.
Or is he the product of Bergeron, where I don't know how much you would know. You would know better when it comes to stats, right? In Corsi 4 and the Fenwick, right? But looking from 22 to 23 and 23 to 24, both his Corsi 4 percentage and the Fenwick percentage dropped 10%. He went from 58 to 48.
Right, so he's taking fewer shots.
But he had a jump, so he had
more time.
Well, he played 16 more games. He had a lot more minutes, but he had almost 400 more Corsi against events in those games, which could be a product of Bergeron, right?
But that would also make sense if because he's been out there more times. So you have to look at the percentage, right? Like, what's the rate?
Right. Wasn't he against better competition too?
Right? I think so.
Look at it. So I think that's conversation for a whole other podcast.
We're trying to convince ourselves that it's totally the right decision. And I think it's a decision that we don't want to have made. We don't want to be making that choice. but I think we all
I'm
know
okay
what
either way, I
the
think.
choice is.
Yeah. I think we're almost
Well,
like talking ourselves into it being okay that they re-sign him.
I know. I think that's
Come
exactly what we're doing. I think
I
that's
don't know if it's
exactly
good
what
or
we're
bad.
doing.
But real quick, I think Heinen comes back. I think they've already started those conversations, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's there. And
Yeah.
I think as long as Maroon's back holds up, I think you'll see him back for at least one more year.
That's the one problem. And the one kind of question mark is for me is he effectively didn't play any regular season games because he came back in the post, like we played one game. Like that doesn't give me anything to go off of. So unless he's willing to sign for chump change, I
Yeah,
mean,
I
if
think he
he's
will.
willing to sign for $1 million or the league minimum, why the hell not? Right? Like,
Yep.
okay, because I found him to be still effective. And Maria and I talked about this in some of our playoff episodes where
Yep.
his just physical presence prevented some shenanigans from happening on the ice. Like that's fine.
Yep.
He doesn't have to go out there and clock somebody. If him literally just physically being there prevents someone on the other team from trying to pull some BS, cool, great. I don't care. I don't need a boxing match. I don't need. I like
He
them,
is
but I don't need
exactly
them.
right. He is exactly what I wanted Hathaway to be that year before,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
Hathaway wasn't.
Yep.
So
Exactly. So before we take a quick look at your proposed free agency signings, we both picked someone who I think his name is only just starting to bubble up and he hasn't been around a terribly long time. So we're going to talk a little bit about Martin Necas. So I think, and you can throw in your 2 cents, I think he is a desirable player for Boston for a couple of different reasons. First and foremost, obviously, because he is Czech, and we know how Don feels about hiring Czech players, obviously. But he's a right winger. He's pretty young. He's 25 and he's currently pretty cheap. So I think we would be seeing him as part of a trade deal. So we're gonna So I wanna just show a delightful little clip of him. He currently plays for Carolina, and last season he had a natural hat trick in a game. So if you're watching on YouTube, you get to watch it. Otherwise, sorry, you get to listen. So we're gonna play it real quick.
The one-man speed machine in the neutral zone when he has the ability to rev it up. A one-man entry on the power play, and that creates this entry at 5-on-5, and then there's no such thing as a bad shot at top speed. And what the goaltender did is he took his eyes off to Georgiev on the blocker side. And when you do that, or at times you turn your blocker prematurely, it can hit the inside of the blocker and go in.
So I was really excited to see that. First of all, for a young guy, I mean, anybody to get a natural hat trick, but for a young guy like that, and then just watching, like I picked that little clip because I was watching his zone entry and his control and his entry into the zone, and then just taking the shot, right? Like just like the Sportsnet announcer had said, you got to take those shots.
Nope.
And how many times have we shouted from the rooftop to shoot the damn puck? And he had complete control over that puck as he entered into the zone. And I think that that's something that I certainly want to see a lot more of. Just again, that he has like a lot of good control going in. And so hopefully that's something that he can bring to the team. But I think it comes as no surprise when we've talked about, when I've heard his name floating out and, trade. I think we all know who we are kind of talking about when it comes to the T word. You want to say it?
Frederick?
No.
I know. Good old Mark. We've got to trade Allmark to somebody. I know.
I hate it. I hate
Hmm.
that the most. I
I
hate it the
know.
most.
I know.
I
And
hate it the
trading Allmark
most.
East, trading Allmark East hurts.
But it's
But
not the same division. It's not the same division.
no, and
So
you got to give up something to get something.
yeah,
That's always how it's been. And if you're going to get someone that can provide top line goal scoring with Pasta,
Yeah.
you need that more than a goalie you're going to face 3 times a year,
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
5-6 times in the playoffs if you play them.
Right.
So
So
I will take that chance to get someone that can play with Zaka and Pasta. You know, if they're going to
so
put them on the
here
left or what they're going to do.
So why don't you walk us real quick? The other person that we both ended up picking was Elias Lindholm. So his name
Yep.
has certainly been thrown around. Again, I highly recommend throwing into rotation at least one league-wide podcast into your rotation. Because there's value in that. And like, that's how I learn about these players, because especially West Coast, I mean, forget about it. So for folks who maybe don't remember, who this guy is or why he's being talked about, he was traded, this season from Calgary, and he ended up in Vancouver. Now, Vancouver is probably, in terms of, the Canadian market, it seems like their sports media is second only to Toronto in terms of insanity. And so I've heard a lot about him, because Vancouver press is very interested in him and keep asking, why haven't you signed yet? Why haven't you signed? I've even heard the interesting rumors about how there have been senior players in Vancouver reaching out to him and saying, "Hey, let's keep the band together." Like even his teammates are saying, "Stick around, stick around."
Yep.
But it's gotten to that point, very much so like the conversation we literally just had about Jake DeBrusk not being re-signed. There's got to be a reason why Elias Lindholm hasn't re-signed in Vancouver.
Yep.
And I believe it was Elliot Friedman, again, in 32 Thoughts, kind of saying it's not going to happen, and that he could potentially be willing to take a lower salary than what is being offered by Vancouver to be somewhere else. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of deal he does sign. And he's a center. And we've been talking about it for 1,000 years, about how Boston needs centers. So you and I both had him. That's kind of the hype around Elias Lindholm. Otherwise, I mean, he's probably the biggest, most prominent name out there for available centers because of the fact that he hasn't signed an extension, right? Like,
yep.
When Noah Hannafin got traded to Vegas fairly quickly, not immediately, but fairly quickly, he signed that extension. So it hasn't happened, and you have to make the assumption Lindholm's going to be hitting the market. Yep. So with that being said, why don't you real quick run down your idea for your team. So let's talk about your most realistic outcome. So why don't you run down who you signed, any trades, how much your terms, and your cap hit.
Yep. So this one is the second one that I got a little crazy on, that I thought was probably a little bit more realistic. So some
of that's gratuitous. I can see Trent Frederick's name in that trade.
So yeah, I know. I still feel like Allmark for Nachas is not enough. And I still feel like Nachas is the better player, and the value for Allmark it's subjective, right? There's been a lot of articles. If you look at it, no one really knows what a number one goalie is worth. So I still feel like the Bruins probably have to give up something else to acquire Nachas. I don't see it the other way around. So I don't think the Bruins are going to give up any draft capital. There's no draft capital to give up.
Yeah.
And going through the list of people, I did not see anyone else out there. I don't think the Bruins are going to give up on Geeky.
No.
I know I have a personal hate and distaste for Trent Frederick, but I still feel like from a not basically just from a realistic view is Frederick is getting to that point where this is the last year of his deal. He is going to get to that point where he's going to start commanding a higher and higher salary. And I just do not feel like his game and his role with the Bruins is anything better than a third line winger, or where I view him as a fourth line center, where he is going to be worth the bang for his buck. So that's why I included Frederick with this deal, is to almost sell high, right?
Yeah.
So you get Nachos. I view the Bruins are going to sign Swayman and Bussy. Those are your two goalies moving forward. So you've got Swayman at 5 years, $6 million. You got Bussy at 2 years, basically 1.75. And then I think Nachos they're going to try to sign him to a longer term deal if they do get him, probably on that same range of like 5.5. I forget where he's at now. He's at like 3. I think he's at 3 now. And I just view him as getting that pay bump. He had quite a few points last season. I know the year before he had like 70. I think he had 70 or something less, or he had quite a bit. So then I view them going after Lindholm probably around 7.25, maybe a little more. That's just where I put him at. I think I think Lindholm was only at like 4 something right now. His deal right now is crazy cheap.
It is. It is.
Which is crazy. Yeah, it's like 4.85 or something. So that's where I'm at there. I think Maroon comes back 1 year 1. I think Heinen comes back on 3 years, 2.5. That seems like a very Don Sweeney deal. For this reason, when you get to the lineup, I do believe, and I do kind of want the Bruins to bring back Shattenkirk at that 1 year 175. I think you've got Shattenkirk, you've got Peak, and you've got Spoon as your bottom 3. And Shattenkirk, when he was in the lineup, was able to run that power play pretty efficiently. And when he was out of the lineup, he was not. Then one guy that always seems linked to the Bruins is Monahan. And I think that is one guy that will come on kind of a 1 year deal. I forget what he's making now, but I felt like 3.25. He's that guy that basically plays every position. And I think he's that guy that would kind of work everywhere. So that is kind of where we're at. And I think that kind of gave me a wiggle room of like 1.2 mil. So there was some wiggle room there. So I thought Monahan and Heine with Patra would be your good third line. That kind of gives Patra the ability to kind of learn, but also take some chances. Because you've got Heinen, who's pretty responsible, and Monahan as well. They also kind of create that good penalty kill. And then you've got Geeky, Lauko, Brezzo, Maroon. Probably got Boquist in there, stick him in and out. And then kind of depending, I saw Nachos as a right wing here. I'm kind of cap friendly in the scouting report. He's a left wing. So you could probably move Lindholm with like Nachos, and then Zaka's the center, and a complete check line of Nachos, Zaka, Pasta might be kind of fun to watch.
Well, we know how Monty loves to play mad scientist, so I'm sure we would have the opportunity to see any and all combinations.
Yeah, but I think that could be potentially something that gets done. Obviously, I don't think Frederick will get traded this year. I think we'll keep Frederick for Monahan will not. I don't know if he'll come, but I think that could be something that potentially happens depending where the Bruins actually feel where Freddie's game is, and if there's more that has to get given up.
Right.
But I think this team could be a little bit deeper. Obviously, hopefully a little bit more scoring. You've got Lori with McAvoy and Lindholm with Carlo, or vice versa, whatever it is. It's not a totally powerhouse defensive core, but I think it's still there. To a point where you can, get through the regular season, and hopefully if everyone stays healthy, you have the chance to actually go deep. And again, you've got some wiggle room. You've got 1.2 mil at the cap, at the trade deadline, so you can get some people. You can figure out what you need and go from there.
Yeah.
And I think Sweeney is that type of GM that wants to keep cap space going into the year, and that's what kind of hamstrung him this year, where he couldn't do anything at the deadline, which sucked.
Yeah,
So,
it did, but
I
mean, at least everybody was in the same boat. So
True.
I will share at least some of my ideas. I will full disclosure. Again, because I fully expected to be a host of a fabulous game show that I was going to host this evening. This was all done at about 5:00 today. And I both didn't pay attention to how much I signed some of these guys for. So please ignore some of these numbers. And then I completely forgot about Pat Maroon.
Oh.
And Dan Heinen. I forgot all about all of those guys. So
well, we can either go through yours.
Well, I'll show you what I got. I'll show you what I got.
Okay, and then we'll save my
I'll
crazy one for
now,
later.
Yes, because I also realized when I was playing with the fun little tool on Cap Friendly that I could not make an edit to my offer after I signed them.
Well, you could just unsign them and re-sign them.
Exactly. So, interestingly enough, I also used Linus Ullmark as a trade piece for Martin Necas. But
you're getting a lot back. I like your deal better.
Here's the thing. This is really interesting. I placed a ton more value on the goaltending than you did. And I kind of was chuckling to myself when you said, like, nobody really knows how to value a number one goalie, right? Yep. And I think that goalies in the NHL are consistently undervalued and underpaid. Now, granted, there aren't very many that are exceptional, right? Just like there aren't many forward skaters who are exceptional, who are making north of $10 million a year. There are a few goalies who are like that. And I think that Jeremy Swayman, I think this is an outrageous amount, only because I think I would speculate, and I could be entirely wrong, so please don't hold this against me because I did not actually look it up, that this could be the single most that any goaltender has ever been paid. But quite frankly, I would make the argument, well, why the hell not? And I will say, when oh my God, the Rangers goaltender, his name all of a sudden escapes me. Shesterkin, when Shesterkin gets his signing, he is going to set the bar for what an elite, ultra elite goaltender is going to make. And I think that Jeremy Swayman is right there with him. And so I think that the Boston Bruins should offer him full terms, $7.5 million.
All right. So before you go, who do you think is the highest paid goalie by average?
Right now?
As of April 24th, 2024.
But like active players?
I think he's active.
Well, that doesn't sound good if you're saying I think he's active. Oh, but I know. It's, what's his name? Rick DiPietro from the New York Islanders, because they're still paying off that insane... No, he's not active, but
well,
they're still paying tons of money.
All right. So Carey Price is making $10.5 million.
Yes.
And Sergei Bobrovsky is at 10.
Yes.
And those are your two. And then you've got Vasilevsky at 9.5.
So I actually have no problem with saying 8 for 8 for Jeremy Swayman.
So he would be the sixth highest paid goalie, even behind
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
Sorokin's at 8.25, and Hellebuck's at 8.5, which makes sense.
Yes,
which I think is probably where you're gonna have to get them, and why you'll probably have to get rid of Ullmark.
And that's exactly it. Yeah. I say yes to extending. He's an RFA, but for Boquist,
bringing him back,
I think he deserves a little bit of a pay bump. I think he showed a lot of promise, and he was very excellent with the the last line, I think he's deserving.
He's still young too.
And he's pretty young. Elias Lindholm, I gave him a pay bump as well, up to 6, because I think that if the Boston Bruins are really serious about bringing somebody who is a very good center, they have to throw money at him. I think that's just the facts, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's the best one who is currently available. So 6. We've kind of talked a little bit about the idea of Jonathan Marchessault, and I don't know how realistic it actually will be, considering his age and how much he currently makes in Las Vegas. However, I gave him a 3-year deal at 6.25 because that would put, I believe he's 33, so that would put him at 36, and I think that's a pretty generous deal.
Yep. I had him on my other team.
For a 33-year-old, yeah.
Yep.
And just for the hell of it, I threw Bert on there because I think that would be a lot of fun. Because why not? He would be getting a pay cut. However, he'd be getting 5 years. So I feel like sometimes when you're on the job hunt and a really great job comes along, and if they're offering you a little bit less money, but you really love the job and you've got that stability for a number of years, you're willing to take a pay cut. I think we've all been there, and I think we've all done that.
Correct.
And I think that Tyler Bertuzzi is kind of in that position. And I said also for Linus Ullmark, again, a first round pick, because I do personally place goaltenders in the highest regard. And I think a very, very excellent elite goaltender, they're almost always underpaid. So,
and you're looking at a 2025. So it's probably, if Carolina does better, then, and it would be bottom 10.
Yeah.
Right. So that would make sense.
Yeah. And then of course you can ignore the fact that I'm only paying Martin just $7.75 because
I think you'll get paid a little bit more.
I do think so. I just couldn't figure out how to edit my offer, and oh well.
And I think Busty will also make more than that as well.
Yes, he will. Here, okay, it didn't.
Okay.
All right, whatever. It did. The first time I did this, I accidentally paid him $7 million, and then the second time I had to redo this, I accidentally paid him the league minimum. So again, ignore the numbers.
You're fine.
But these were kind of some of my lineup ideas. I also didn't put a ton of thought into the lineups nearly as much as you, because I would certainly keep like Marshy and Coyle together, because I think that they had that really good chemistry in that sense. But otherwise, you and I were pretty much spot on in terms of at least the back half of this team.
Yep.
I didn't really know what to do with some of our young guys. I think that thinking about the 3 quote unquote rookies that the Bruins had last year, they did well. Like, don't get me wrong. They did, considering how difficult it is for rookies to make it on a team, especially a team like the Boston Bruins, like an established team. They did all right. The fact that they actually got games, that's something to be proud of. They aren't,
right. So you're talking what, Patra? So you're talking Patra,
Lowry,
Fischer. Yeah.
I would say surprisingly that Lowry was the one who came out on top, which he was the last one to come in, if you recall, because he kind of like just didn't make the cut because there was quite literally no room for him.
Right.
And he's the one who I think of the 3 very much so is going to be starting the year as a Bruin.
That's how I see it. I think Patra, I would not be surprised if he starts in the minors. I don't think that would be right. I don't think that would be necessarily a bad thing or something that is anything that the Bruins fans need to worry about. He's like 2021. Just it's okay.
And he had surgery.
Right. I think his shoulder was kind of messed up the whole year. So this was kind of a good thing. And Beecher, I love Beecher, but there's always that
too.
thing in the back of my mind where I don't know how much the Bruins love Beecher. So
I don't
maybe
understand that dynamic. The
it's
man hills it on the face-offs. I don't
right.
see the issue.
And that's where maybe he's trade bait. You hate to say it, but he is one of those guys that could be a piece of a trade that goes.
I guess it would depend on how their new center, Elias Lindholm, does at the face-off dot.
Well, if you look at his scouting report, he's quite good. He wins over 55% of his draws, so I'll take that.
There you go.
Thank you.
There you go.
So it'll be interesting. Did you want to go over my crazy?
So
you asked for crazy, and I gave it to you.
I also had requested to our listeners that my contestants on my crazy game show here bring an absolutely wild, unhinged proposal, because why not? Let's have some fun. So,
this is my favorite team of all time.
I'm a little scared.
Yep.
What mess have you put the Boston Bruins in?
So to start, the cap spaces were still at $900,000 in cap space.
You got it in.
I still have some cap space. So we're getting Chychrun, and I wanted Forsberg as my backup goalie, not Bussy. So we are trading Beecher, Freddie, and Ullmark to Ottawa, and that's some. So the Chychrun
wants to go to Ottawa. That's cruel.
I know. I don't think this trade ever happens. I don't think Ullmark is going to put.
I didn't even see this. This is a live reaction.
I'm
looking at your second trade. Holy crap.
All right. So there's that. This is the trade that I've been seeing in, I think it was Bleacher Report, said, where could Zibanejad go if he was on the trade block? And Boston was one of those teams. So I was like, okay, what would I give up? Well, for shits and giggles, let's give up Patra and let's give up Lindholm. Why Lindholm? Well, we're getting Chychrun. Why Patra? Well, you got to give up something to get something. So there's that.
You're out of your mind.
And now you have, if you look, we're signing another center down below. So we don't need Mr. Coyle anymore. But I need a sixth defenseman. So I am going to get Andreas England from LA, and we're going to pick up a draft pick. So we're signing Swayman just for shits and giggles, 1 year, 6. It's probably going to be
1 year.
Whatever. I needed something, right? My favorite players, we're signing Stamkos to a 3-year, $9.25 million deal. We're bringing back everybody's favorite Heinen, everybody's favorite Maroon. Like I said before, we're going to bring in good old Monahan, and we're going to bring in Patrick Kane at 1 year, $2.25.
I'm laughing. I literally have tears in my eyes right now. Like, I'm no joke crying.
But if you go to if you have the lineup, I'm telling you, this lineup's pretty solid. I don't know if you saved it.
You know what? I don't know that I have your crazy lineup.
All right, so you've got Zacha, Stamkos, Pasta. You've got Marchand, Zibanejad, and Kane. Then Heinen, Monahan, and Lysell. Just because Lysell, why not? Let him play. He's going to play with Monahan and Heinen. He can do whatever the hell he wants. And then you've got Lauko, Geeky, Brazeau, and then you got Maroon. And then you've got your D. You've got Lorai, Mack, Chychrun, and Carlo, and England and Pete. And then you've still got Spoon. So I've got all my guys right there. And you still got $900,000 in cap space for Mr. Don to pay attention to.
Here's your lineup.
There it is. Look how that's beautiful. Who doesn't want Stamkos and Pasternak on the same team?
That's quite literally the most unhinged lineup. You're mad scientist.
I was trying to think. I'm like, I think Coyle would fit in with LA. So I figured that would make sense. I don't know how much Lindholm in New York makes sense. I feel like New York's probably got a whole bunch of defensemen already, but they could flip him. They could do something, but they could probably use Patra as that replacement for Zibanejad. I think Patra has shown those flashes where he can be that solid center over time. He can grow. I mean, give him 3-4 years. He'll probably become that solid not Bergeron, but that Bergeron type player who kind of goes under the radar a little bit. So, and God damn it, I want Stamkos on this team more than anything. Just so bad. It would be so, and I don't think I don't know. Like the Lightning don't have any cap space. So
They got nothing.
Give me
Yeah.
like they're already over the cap. So just give me Stamkos at 9.25. I don't need Lindholm. Nope. I don't need either Lindholm, apparently.
Apparently you don't need either of them. So
So you wanted crazy, there's some crazy.
I think
it's not gonna happen, but it's fun to talk about.
No, that's pretty insane. But I think thinking about how Don thinks and the players and the kinds of players that he likes on Boston, I think nobody should be surprised by the addition of another Czech and another Swede.
Yep.
So,
and I think they fit in well with what Monty's system is, right? That's kind of where I view
and the broader Boston system, right? Like we've talked about on the podcast before, the way that the players play in the larger system in Boston and how that is even practiced in Providence, so that there's very little need for kind of transition. Right. I think players who are the Swedish players and the Czech players, I mean, I don't know what it is, but it's a style and a system that they adapt very well to. And Canadians, Americans, like that's pretty much it. There's rarely ever a Russian team. I don't know what to make of that.
and that the more I think about it, that's the more reason why I talk myself into bringing Shattenkirk back. Is he was here last year, he was good, but I think he needs that second year to solidify the fact that he knows how to play the system, he knows how to play with the people, he's now used to that system, and that would do him well. Where one of the guys that, if they can afford him to bring, would be like a Brady Shea, something like that, where I don't think they need a top dude. They don't need a top line to play with Mac. They've got Lindholm, they've got Lowry, they've got somebody there, but they need that kind of floater, right?
Yeah,
but they need that floater. So that's why I'm thinking like Brady Shea, someone along those lines. But I still think he's kind of he'll make too much. But someone like that, but the free agents aren't really there unless you go by trade. So it's tough, where I can see them bringing back Shattenkirk, saving that money and giving that back to Swayman and giving him that extra $1 million, or signing Nachos or whoever else they kind of bring in. Because you have to understand, the sum of the players, what makes sense, right? Like, so it's that cap game, and the Bruins do a great job of figuring out that cap game. Like it or not, they think about it. They play with the numbers, and it's going to be fun as hell to watch. I'm excited.
The other thought that kind of crossed my mind as I'm thinking about what is the realistic number that Jeremy Swayman could end up with, Carey Price aside, because technically he's not retired, but he is, for all intents and purposes, he's retired. And so your top goaltenders, your highest paid goaltenders in the league are all Russian. And they are also with teams that will shell out that kind of money for an elite Russian goaltender. Like, they are a different breed. The how they come out of Russia, their training, like, they are worthy of said sum, right? So you'd be looking at Jeremy Swayman being potentially the highest paid American goaltender. He's going to surpass Jake Ottinger in salary. If at minimum, they need to be paid the same. And I made this argument last year. And this year, he should be paid more. But the thing about the Boston Bruins, and what I had said earlier about how oftentimes you'll take a pay cut to go work at the place that you want to be. Boston is notorious, and I don't mean it necessarily in a bad way, but they're very good at selling the culture, which is, not wrong.
Right.
The lifestyle, what it means to be a Bruin, in exchange for paying maybe a little bit less. They definitely get their top guys to take team friendly deals, right? Like,
Yep.
if you remember
Yep.
when Pasta was getting his extension, there were talks that from very well respected journalists across the league saying, he could probably swing 13 million.
Easily.
He could flirt with 14. He'd be worth 14. And he took what, 11.5, right?
I think so, yeah. Yep.
This is kind of the same thing that everybody knows that Jeremy Swayman wants to stay in Boston. Everybody knows that he wants to be there for his career. And I think if it weren't for all of those kind of intangibles of being in Boston, if he was in New York, I don't know, other teams that have money, I wouldn't be surprised if someone threw 10 at him. He's not going to get that because it's Boston.
Right.
And
No,
you'll be prying money out of the Jacobs gold dead hands to actually pay someone a fair amount. But it's Boston and people want to play there. And it's not just, there's so much more to a job. And they're very good at leveraging those intangibles to get a guy for a little bit less money.
Right. Well, there's two other things too, right? I forget what the second thing is, but the first one is it's his first contract after his kind of initial deal. So he's still not doing right. So he's not doing like the Connor Hellebuck deal where he's making 10 or 8.5 a year. You've got Sergey who's making 10, who is probably was his third deal. So he still needs to, in my mind, almost still prove himself. Where I could see him making between 7 and 8. I personally like it if he could make 6, just because then you've got more room. But I would not be surprised if you see 8 years, 8 million. And what is that, 64? I think that would be something that's probably would make sense. But I would like 8 years, 7, I think, just kind of draw it there. I would be quite happy with that. Ilya is making 8.25. I don't know if Ilya, how old he is on the Islanders, but he seems like a comp. I would say I would rather have Swayman over Sorokin at this point.
Yeah.
But I don't really want to pay Swayman more than Sorokin.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see how old Ilya is. But
here's an interesting
deal, and I still think he does need to prove it a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing though
Sorokin
that
is 28,
Boston does
25-ish.
25, maybe 25, 26.
Right.
Yeah, he's got to
like
be 24 maybe because he's an RFA. I would say
I can look it up as how fast my internet goes.
I would say a comparable, not necessarily in terms of position, but let's say experience. I'm looking at Charlie McAvoy. And the Boston Bruins, while yes, they broker team-friendly deals, the guys that they recognize as franchise players, they are very, very good at identifying those players very early on in their careers and respect them and recognize that by then almost always offering term. So like Charlie McAvoy, it was the same thing. He had 2 contracts of 3 years apiece, and then he got his 8-year deal. So I think.
I mean, even Carlo. Like Carlo got a decent deal.
Right.
You know what? 6 years, 24. So
yeah, I mean, David Pasternak is a little bit different because he had a 3-year and then a 6-year and then his 8-year. But I think he took a little bit longer to get there. As opposed to, I saw Charlie McAvoy get there, start to enter elite status in his position, a little bit more on pace that compared to Jeremy Swayman. The absolutely insane thing is the fact that Jeremy Swayman and goaltenders in general tend to hit their real stride. That's the position that hits their stride the latest in their development. And that's just the part that's totally bonkers that we very well may not have even come close to seeing how good he can be. So,
comparing Swayman last year to
he's
Swayman
25.
this year is night and day. Yeah, it's insane.
And he was good last year. He was good last year.
He was unreal this year.
Unreal. And quite frankly, at one point I was saying, like, do we need to be talking about him being a Vezina candidate this year? Because what? I think the only detriment to him was. And I think the only detriment to him is the fact that he played half the games, right? I think
can he play more games is the question.
Good as much as the tandem, the splitting the time is good for goalies, because again, we've talked about this on the pod. Like, you look at Connor Hellebuck, he had a significantly better year this year because he played fewer games. And I think that's just becoming more and more the norm, and recognizing, like, giving 60% or 70% to your starter is going to be, you're going to get a better return if you do that. So, but unfortunately, because he played half of them, I think Linus just got lucky last year. I think he blew the competition out of the water, and I think it was a combination of, like, nobody expected it. So, like, expectations were low to a very extreme degree. And so, like, I think Linus was deserving of that Vezina, but I also think he benefited from the situation, and Swayman didn't have that. And so, meh. But if he has a year next year like he did this year, then it's only a matter of time before he gets.
Yeah, and I think people are starting to understand that it's not the days of, like, Martin Brodeur, who's playing 72 games a year, right? No. Like, come on. No, I mean, I think 50 some games, as long as you're the number one goalie that's playing at least 60-70% of the games in the regular season, and you're playing all of the games in the playoffs, that's what we need. That's why I think don't
3-4 starts in a row. 3-4 starts in a row, resting. And then back at it. But
so,
well, I appreciate you coming up with some of these very interesting lines and indulging me this evening in lieu of our usual programming, which is nothing because it's June and the Bruins are playing.
No, and it's 7:00 my time, so isn't the game on now?
Probably, but I don't care because I'm not watching. But
you want some news? Not Bruins related.
I would love news. You have breaking news?
According to NHL.com, that Philip Hronek has signed an 8-year, $58 million contract with the Canucks. Defenseman had a career high 48 points this year.
Where was he coming from? No, he's there
with Vancouver. So he has 7.25 annual value, and he's 26.
That's a chunk of change.
I don't think that gives the Bruins any type of kind of, set the bar. So I don't really think the Bruins have a defenseman that we could use. But that's kind of interesting that a 26-year-old defenseman now is worth about 7.25, which makes that Carlo deal look fucking insane right now, where he's only making like 4 something.
I know.
Which is amazing. So
I know.
kudos to Don on that thing, where I thought Carlo's career was over with all the concussions and the fact that he was not a very good defenseman, but he's slowly become one of my more favorite Bruins.
Yep.
That I'm actually kind of glad they kept him and re-signed him.
Yeah.
So
Well,
there you go.
defensemen tend to start to hit their stride around 27, 28, and he's 27 years old. So there you go.
So I think that's probably good with McAvoy, right? So he can kind of grow into that, where I think some of us have been a little bit maybe disappointed that he hasn't grown to be that kind of point producer or more offensive type, where I don't think that's him. Or I would rather see Lori be that guy and Charlie be that kind of two-way, more physical type thing. So we could talk about all that shit later.
It will come. The day will come. And we will, once we know what's happening.
Oh, it's gonna be Christmas. I'm so excited.
It's third Christmas, right?
It's Christmas in July, so it's just super early. It's the beginning.
Exactly. So just as some housekeeping for our listeners, Maria and I will be back on we'll have a full length episode the week of free agency, TBD. I think we might have a special quick emergency recap on the 1st, and then we might have a fuller length debrief, possibly even on the 2nd. And after that, we might have some other surprises. As the summer goes on, we'll be talking about maybe the prospects, maybe not. Depends on if there's anybody exciting worth talking about. But before you know it, it's going to be the end of August, and we're going to start seeing the teams come back together. The Bruins just released their preseason schedule, which was really interesting. Some of the usual play teams. We've got Washington, and we've got the Rangers. I believe, did I see Philadelphia is in there?
Yep.
But they are playing the LA Kings up in Quebec City. I'm very jealous. I would love to go. It is far away.
Do
Quebec
you think
far?
You think the Bruins sign Bergeron to a one-day deal and have him?
No, never.
I hope he does. Come
that'd be hilarious. You know he's going to be there. So.
Yeah.
So, but the fact that they've released our preseason schedule means that they're not far from releasing the regular season schedule, and soon it's going to be October. So can't wait.
Yep.
But stay tuned. If there's anything particularly exciting, some huge trades or whatever, Maria and I will hop on and do a quick recap and chat about what's happened. Because if you recall, last year, I think about a day or two before free agency is when we had some big trades happen for the Bruins. So as soon as that Stanley Cup is handed out, things are going to start moving, and they're going to start moving fast. So stick with us. We'll try to stay on, and maybe we'll have a special episode. Who knows? We'll see.
We'll still be weird in the Discord, so just join.
We will.
You'll get all the information you need.
Yes. So find us on all of our social media. We're on Twitter, X, whatever the hell it is. Mastodon. We've got our Discord. Even if you feel like you can't keep up, it's usually a lot of fun to observe. And the next thing you know, you're going to be part of the conversation. So don't be shy. Join us there. Follow us, watch us on YouTube, all that good stuff. And with that, thank you, Momo.
Thank you.
And of course, as always, go Bees.
Testicles, wallet, what?
God damn it.
Oh, shit. We're keeping this. Adrian, that's for you. Let's go.